Who doesn't like dragons? Despite having never existed, they've left their mark on human history. Here are 10 of the most culturally important dragons in the world. Number 10, Zilant. You may not have heard of it, but Kazan is one of the most important cities in Russia. Capital of the Tatarstan Republic and independent Khanate, it was captured by Ivan the Terrible, rebuilt by Catherine the Great, and was home to both Tolstoy and Lenin as students. It's actually a century and a half older than Moscow and better displays the East meets West mystique of Eurasia. In fact, Moscow has paid vast sums to Kazan to keep it a part of the nation. Nowadays, it's a big, oil-rich manufacturing center. The story of its founding is like a creation myth. According to legend, the land on which Kazan was built was a serpent's nest pervaded by a foul stench and a whistling sound. One of the serpents, in particular known as Zilant, had two heads, one a snake's, with which it ate animals, and the other a bull's, with which it ate grass. Thinking this is an ideal place to found a powerful capital city, Kazan's founder paid a wizard to clear the nest. However, because it also had wings, Zilant escaped to a nearby hill and terrorized the city as it grew. Eventually, Zilant was killed and is nowadays commemorated on the Kazan coat of arms. In heraldry, Zilant is a type of dragon called a wyvern. These have the upper body of a dragon and the lower body or tail of a serpent. Number 9, Ryujin. In Japan, the dragon is a symbol of power. There are two types, the Tatsu and the Ryu, both of which, unlike Chinese dragons, are usually depicted with 3 claws. Most powerful of all of them is the dragon god of the Shinto faith, Ryujin. Dwelling under the sea in a coral palace, he is lord of the ocean and possessor of the tide jewels, which he uses to control the tides. Being a water dragon, he is attended by a staff of half-fish, half-human butlers. Seen as the guardian of the Shinto faith, Ryujin is depicted at temples and shrines throughout Japan. Under him are the Dragon Kings, which are perhaps the most diverse dragons in the world. They include the 40-foot-long Han Ryu, striped with 9 different colors, the 8-headed Yamata no Orochi, and the super-sighted Ryu, who can see for more than 100 miles. Ryujin also has a daughter, the luminous jewel Toyotama Hime. As Dragon Princess of the Sea, she is renowned for her extreme beauty, except in dragon form. Number 8, Antaboga. A mainstay of Javanese shadow plays, Antaboga, the World Serpent, is older than age itself. Antaboga spent all his timelessness meditating, eventually meditating into existence a companion, the world turtle Bedwang. This was the beginning of the universe. Noticing Bedwang came with an underworld as well as a world, Antaboga placed a black stone lid to keep it shut. But the underworld gods Satasuyara and Batarakala didn't like the dark and they pushed it back up, allowing earth and light to flow into existence, followed by water and skies, the sun, moon, stars, and so on. Then, with the universe created, Antaboga departed for heaven. However, the story doesn't end there. In heaven, he was asked to build a palace for the supreme god Batara Guru and found it impossible without arms or legs. So the dragon wept, and from his tears came a jewel-encrusted egg. Fortunately, this was enough to please Batara Guru, who thought of it as an excellent decoration for his palace, even after the goddess Dewi Shri hatched out. Number 7, Fafnir. Once a mortal man, Fafnir became a dragon after killing his dad for his gold, which, unknown to him, was cursed by the Norse god Odin. Unable to spend his ill-gotten fortune, Fafnir was doomed to protect it until the hero Sigurd, spurred on by Odin and Fafnir's own brother Regin, slayed him. On the brother's request, Sigurd also took out Fafnir's heart and roasted it over a fire. According to tradition, Regin hoped to gain knowledge by eating the heart of a dragon. Unfortunately for him, however, Sigurd touched the heart while it was cooking to check if it was done, burning his thumb. Then he stuck his burned thumb in his mouth, inadvertently consuming some of the heart, and suddenly found himself able to understand the language of birds, which warned him just in the nick of time that Regin planned to kill him. So Sigurd killed Regin instead and took Fafnir's treasure for himself. What makes Fafnir so important, you might be asking? Well, this Old Norse dragon wasn't just the star of the Sunga saga, he was also a key influence for J.R.R. Tolkien and a template for the Hobbit's dragon Smaug. Like Fafnir, who warned Sigurd away from his hoard, saying, "That same gold which I have owned shall be thy bane too," Smaug can talk. "My armor is like tenfold shields," he once built by Baggins.
My teeth are swords. My claws are spears.
And so on. And of course, Baggins, like Sigurd, is there to steal his treasure. Fafnir and other dragons in ancient literature, including the dragon in Beowulf, weren't just models for Smaug, though they were the spark behind the whole Middle-earth. "I desired dragons with a profound desire," Tolkien once said, describing the world that contained even the imagination of Fafnir as rich and beautiful. In fact, some of his earliest stories were about dragons, so without Fafnir, we may never have had The Lord of the Rings, or even the fantasy genre as we know it, which would be a terrible, terrible shame. Number 6. St. George's Dragon. The dragon slain by the Greek-born Roman soldier known today as St. George lived near the city of Cyllene in present-day Libya. According to the story, he rode into town amid a gathering storm and skewered the beast on his lance, which he named Ascalon. He named his lance. However, it wasn't until the 9th century, 500 years after St. George's death, that the earliest depictions appeared. The tale didn't even reach Western Europe until the 13th century, almost a millennium after his death. In other words, it's safe to say that this story was no more than a fable. It's shocking, we know. That's not to say people in the Middle Ages didn't believe in dragons, though they did. Small brains. In fact, dragons appeared in authoritative bestiaries and books on natural history. Part of the reason for this is the prevalence of fake stuffed dragon specimens. Dragons. But it also had to do with things getting lost in translation. In Europe, at least, the mythical dragon probably evolved through centuries of embellishment and what was originally just some kind of boring old snake, because the Greek word for serpent is draken. Number 5. Why Dragoch? Maybe. The Welsh national flag is one of the most striking in the world, a large and detailed red dragon, Dragoch in Welsh, on a background of green and white. And while officially it only dates back to 1959, the red dragon has been an emblem of Wales much longer, used as early as 655 AD by Cadwal, the King of Gwynedd. The red dragon also featured as a symbol of Wales in the 12th century legend of Merlin, waking up and fighting a white dragon representing England. In fact, King Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon's name means dragon head. In 1346, at the Battle of Crecy, green and white-clad Welsh archers marched under a red dragon standard. But it was Henry VII who first superimposed the image of the red dragon, a sign of his Cadwallad lineage, on a background of green and white, the colours of the House of Tudor, for his flag at the Battle of Bosworth. By the beginning of the 19th century, when Britain annexed Ireland, the red dragon was an obvious choice for the national emblem of Wales. In 1953, it was surrounded by a circle, and given the text in Welsh, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but in English is the red dragon gives impetus. Number 4, the Great Red Dragon. In the Bible's apocalyptic final book, the Book of Revelation, Satan appears as the Great Red Dragon. And he's not holding back. The 7-headed, 10-horned beast, thought to symbolize the 7 hills of Rome, appeared and swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. Then he stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Famously painted by William Blake, the Great Red Dragon hates the woman for giving birth to a follower of God. In Blake's series of watercolors, the sky is stormy and dark, whipped up by the beating of the red dragon's wings. A flood invoked by the dragon rises to engulf her, but at the last moment, as the dragon hovers to watch her drown, God saves her by granting her wings. It's a miracle. For Blake, good and evil were two sides of the same coin, hence the depiction of the woman's arms and the dragon's arms both outstretched in a mirror image. Neither exists independently of the other. Number 3, Drak. Another country with a dragon on the flag is Bhutan, almost ethereal in white, though originally green on a background of orange and yellow. This is Drak, the Thunder Dragon. Actually, to the people who live there, the Drakpa, Bhutan's real name is Dracul, the land of the Thunder Dragon. There's a whole Thunder Dragon culture with dragon temples and monuments that's passed from generation to generation since ancient times. Drak originated in Tibet and spread to Bhutan as the Drukpa Kagyu lineage. In Tibetan mythology, Druk is subordinate to the Klu Chinese-style water dragons, temperamental in nature, whose queen would ride out with garments made of snakes and a bag full of disease. What's in the bag? Diseases. Okay. Drak is more generally benevolent. On the flag of Bhutan, its white scales represent purity and the unity of different ethnic groups, while the jewels in its claws represent the wealth and perfection of Dracul, or Bhutan. Number 2, La Garouille. The French town of Rouen was, in the Middle Ages, terrorized by a bloodthirsty dragon, at least according to legends. The gargoyle who lived in a cave by the Seine had a serpentine neck, a slender head, and membranous wings. But it still caused damage wherever it went, spouting water, sinking ships, as well as, breathing fire. According to legend, locals became so desperate to make peace with the dragon that they sacrificed criminals and, more reluctantly, maidens to it. In the end, though, it was the man of the cloth, Frater Romanus, who saved the people, but only on the condition that they built a town in the church and got themselves baptized already. After they agreed, he rode out to La Garouille and tamed it with the sign of a cross, and then led it back to be burned at the stake. Only its head and neck survived being fire retardants. naturally. So they were mounted on the wall of the town. A replica was also carved into Rouen Cathedral, becoming the world's first gargoyle. The architectural waterspouts named for the dragon. The gargoyle's name, by the way, comes from the late Latin gargula, meaning throat. Number 1, the Azure Dragon. So important is the Azure Dragon in classical Chinese mythology that the grouping of stars, or asterism representing it, takes up a quarter of the sky and is split into 7 sections. In fact, the Azure Dragon is even important in Japan as Tokyo's guardian, and also in Korea. Representatives of the East, the Azure Dragon is one of the 4 cardinal totems, the others being the vermilion bird, south, the white tiger, west, and the black tortoise in the north. It has control over the weather, breathing clouds and influencing rivers, lakes, and seas. There are many other dragons in Chinese mythology, of course. Beside the Dragon King, who controls all of China's seas and can take any form, the Azure Dragon is simply the wealth, and the Cloud Dragon, who flies through clouds to make it rain, and is often depicted in paintings.